Good morning, afternoon, and evening to all the speakers and participants. My name is Srinidhi, and I am going to be your MC for this session. On the behalf of Silray, I extend a very warm welcome to one and all present here today. I'm going to start off with a quick introduction of Silray and the conference Splendor 2021, for which we have all gathered here for. Founded in 2013, Silray was born out of a desire to make learning relevant, available, and fun. We believe that we build a safe and healthy environment, especially for children to experiment with their ideas. We can open up a new world of opportunities for them. Through an exploratory and collaborative approach, Silray conceptualizes and designs learning programs which helps individuals unlearn, unleash, and unlimit. Silray Splendor 2021 is the first virtual inclusive international conference on the future of education, bringing together exceptional educators, researchers, and enthusiasts. It empowers synergetic collaborations to increase reach, impact, and implementation of creative breakthrough ideas. It is a hand-picked compilation of award-winning delegates working on national education policy, curriculum design, assessments, learning frameworks, activists, published authors, school leaders, teachers, and last but not the least, students. It is a unique opportunity to understand perspectives, brainstorm solutions to challenging problems in your area of work, initiate collaborations and future engagements, and define the future of education. We encourage everyone to be a part of these conversations and take your learnings forward to create an impact. Silray is really looking forward to supporting you in your journey. Before we begin, I would like to thank the sponsors. Thanks to our main sponsors, Efficacy, a biostatistics and learning statistical programming service provider, and Bluebell's Schools of Integrated Learning, an initiative of the Bluebell's group of schools, a premier school education provider in Gurugram. Shout out to the MVJ group of institutions for sponsoring and partnering with us, and Luvia Bakeries for their delicious goodies. Thanks to our partners, Jyoti Nivas Autonomous College for supporting us in many ways, Brightside Foundation, and Ondede. Special mention to all our supporters, Yugi Setu, Hari Iyer, Vasudevan Alasingachar, Damodaran Rajalingam, Arun Padmanabhan. Families of the Silray team are also thanked for supporting us. Up next, I would like to take everybody through the code of conduct. So the code of conduct is actually quite simple. So we respect everybody, all the speakers and all the audience to be respectful, to prioritize collaboration over conflict, disrupt ideas and not meetings, sorry. Some etiquettes to be followed throughout this conference. Please mute yourself. Raise your hand if you have something to contribute. Be on time. Come prepared with questions for our speakers. Keep your video on and interact and participate with everyone. So before we move ahead, we would like to take a quick poll, which is something that we do at the beginning of every session. So let's have a glimpse of all the diverse backgrounds and professions that we all come from. So to access this poll, you can either scan the QR code on the page or go to the website and enter the passcode. Also, you can follow the link that's been given in the chat. So I would like to give a couple of minutes, and if anybody has any difficulties, please tell us on the chat so we can help you out. I see the results going up. Let's give it a minute or so for all the responses to come in. I see some responses rolling in. So the question is, what are you expecting from the conference? Awareness, more learning and knowledge, learning about new topics, ideas, variety of folks. Fun, okay. Opportunity to hear and learn from other speakers. We will give it around a minute for all the responses to roll in. More insights into new theories, experiences, ideas emerging from the pandemic. What's the complete answer? To help enrich the education space. That's a great answer. Oh, I see some replies coming in the chat box. Okay, I think voting has closed. So those were some really interesting responses. And I'm really excited to have so many different variety of people from so many different backgrounds gathered at one place. So I thank all of you for your participation. So with this, I would like to kickstart this session. And first up on our agenda is the opening remarks. I would like to introduce the first speaker of the day, Sakina Shag. Sakina completed her Bachelor's of Arts from the Indian Institute of Psychology and Research and went on to finish her MS in Behavioral Sciences from the Christ University, Bangalore. She worked as a member of Brightside Foundation before joining Silray as the key account manager, where she currently works today. She aspires to be a behavioral psychologist. Her hobbies outside of work include writing and watching documentaries. Let's all give it up for Sakina.
Thank you, Srinidhi. Hello, everyone. I hope all of you are doing great. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to Splendor 2021, an inclusive international conference on the future of education, a part of the Education is Changing webinar series. I am Sakina Sheikh, Key Account Manager at Silray and Coordinator of Splendor. I thank each and every one of you for taking the time out on a Friday morning, afternoon, night, and being part of this important event where crucial discussions around the education field are taking place. A majority of you guys must be wondering, what does the word Silray even mean? Is it an abbreviation? Silray simply means to learn in Lojban. Silray is a decade-old leading educational organization that has been working towards making learning relevant, available, and fun for children and adults. We strongly believe that learning cannot be forced. Rather, learning should happen independently, and the process of learning should be fun and enjoyable. We have expertise in designing diverse curriculum for children of all age groups. Our facilitators go through a special training program curated by us. And over the last 10 years, we have organized 800 plus programs for 13,000 plus children, all designed by us in house. We have collaborated with 100 plus partners across the globe. We would not have been able to accomplish all of this without our strong team. It started with just 2 people and now has grown to 50 plus. Over the past years, we have touched thousands of lives across the world. Also, we have a non-profit initiative called the Giving Tree, which is the closest to our hearts. It was started in 2015, and through this project, we work with children of government schools and low-income private schools. This is a way of giving back to the society and helping the needful children receive what they rightfully deserve, the right to proper education and to build a future. Our work with these children has brought about a great impact on their learning. The conference that has been happening since yesterday aims to bring together speakers, educators, students, parents from all around the world to engage in meaningful discussions on what the future holds in the field of education and technology. Especially in today's scenario, when the world has been struggling to live through a pandemic, the discussions on the right steps to take towards development in education becomes all the more vital. In doing so, we create opportunities for those who still do not have access to education. In this light, today's session will be focusing on health and education in the time of COVID, how to practice empathy with the people around you and dialogue about education from the perspective of music. In my opinion, we fail to inculcate in classrooms the fundamental human values of compassion, kindness, tolerance, and empathy. Discussing these topics is confined to the few schools that have the moral value classes, or it is not discussed at all. It was long due for the educationists and the curriculum developers to revisit the education policy, learning objectives, course contents, and inculcate the element and tolerance in the curriculums. Finally, this is happening through NEP 2020. It is imperative to know and understand each other, for which we need to promote a learning environment based on collaboration, cooperation, and coordination. These changes would require collective efforts from all stakeholders, curriculum developers, teachers, students, and a broader community of parents. I believe change is the only constant in our lives, but the same cannot be said for the absolute education systems that we have in place. We have stuck to the same old ways for a very long time. Some things are good and some things are bad. So let's have a quick poll to get a count of how many of us are happy with the education systems that are in place. Can I have the Mentimeter link? Let's give it another 30 seconds. Okay. A majority of you guys, as expected, said you are not happy with the education systems that are in place. I was expecting that. So that is the reason why we are having this conference. So let's take initiative to help make the changes we want through this conference and put our opinions out there for the world to hear. I would also love to hear about your most memorable event, experience of your school or college life. You can share it in the chat or request yourself to be unmuted and you can speak up. You can also raise your hand if you would like to be unmuted.
So, hi, ma'am. This is
Hi,
Sija.
Sija.
Hi, ma'am. This is
Hi.
Sija. Ma'am, actually, I'm here to share my school experience.
Okay, go ahead.
My 8 years I studied in Christ, and
Okay.
my rest of the 2 years I studied in Carmel. So it was like both was good as of my parents' decision was to go to Carmel. So as we shifted to near to that college, so now I'm studying at Jyoti Nivas as of now for my college, and my school experience is not so much better and all. It was okay, okay. Actually, till my sixth, no, not sixth, seventh. Till my seventh, my studies and all was okay, okay. Like I was good in studies, and after later, it became a bit tough for me everything and all. So it was okay, okay. I was passing, and yeah, much better now. And now, the reason because I joined to this session is I just wanted to know what to do my next. I don't know what to do. So I would like if you people would tell that.
Okay, thank you for sharing your experience with us, Sudha. Surely, yes. Please do stay tuned. We are having some amazing speakers coming in, and you would be getting some great insights from them as to what you want to do in future, right? You say you're confused about it. I see some comments coming in. Most of them say that they are they cherish their time with their friends in their Teachers' Day celebration. Okay, that sounds great. Okay, all right. Let's move on then. Please, you can put in your experiences in the chat so all of them can read. Okay, so during today's session, I would encourage everyone to take part actively, ask questions, engage, interact, spread ideas. You are free to showcase the best creative versions of yourselves. All ideas and thoughts are welcome, so do not be afraid to speak up your mind. I'm sure that this session will be a birthplace of some great ideas that will help grow and evolve the field of education. With that being said, get ready for an insightful and entertaining ride through today's session that will also include a fireside chat, paper presentations, and panel discussion led by some prominent people in the industry coming in from across the globe. We also have some fun games coming in your way. Once again, I thank each and every one of you for being present here. Now, without further ado, let's begin the session. Over to you, Srinidhi.
Thank you, Sakina, for your opening remarks and your wonderful introduction. Up next on the agenda, we have a fireside chat on the topic health education in the time of COVID 19 with Deepshika Yadav in conversation with Dr. Olainka Umar Farao. Dr. Olainka Umar Farao is a medical doctor and public health specialist with keen interest in healthcare management and reforms, health literacy, integrated service delivery and access, with bias for child health and gender equity. She has over 14 years experience in the public, private, and non-for-profit sectors in Nigeria. She works as the Deputy Project Director, Risk Communications with USAID Breakthrough Action Nigeria, a social behavior change project that is focused on adopting innovative approaches such as human centered design, behavior economics, digital health, and strategic community engagement to guide multi pronged, coordinated interventions to address socio cultural genders and norms that underpin healthcare seeking behavior and practices. Joining here is Deepshika Yadav. An engineer by profession, Deepshika completed her MBA from one of the most prestigious schools in India, the Indian School of Business. After working in companies such as Accenture and Capgemini for a couple of years, she founded an organization, World We Desire, formerly known as Startup Jugalbandi, where she has been a facilitator for the past 2 years. Join me in welcoming them for an insightful session.
Hi, Alenka. I
Hi,
hope you're doing great.
great Deepshika. I'm just not sure what's happening to my background. Hi, everyone. Great to have you here.
Awesome. So let's get started with our question answers. And we do have a interactive activity coming up right after, just in few minutes. So stay tuned for that. But I'll get started with my questions with you, Alenka. So my first question for you is, what role did technology play in improving health education in the work you did during this pandemic?
So thank you so much, Deepshika, and really great to
Yeah.
be here this morning, this afternoon, this evening with everyone. And so we all know that COVID-19, the COVID pandemic, hit every part of the globe and nobody was spared. Specifically, so I work in Nigeria. I'm a public health physician working across different health areas, specifically focusing around social and behavior change. So when the COVID pandemic hit, I was seconded to support the national response and working with the, we call them the Nigeria Center for Disease Control. And in trying to get everyone on board to communicate effectively, we needed to look at what were our options to communicating, and the normal modus operandi was travel around, get people gathered in one place, and definitely that was not going to be a situation in COVID. So we focused more on using technology. So Zoom became one of our means of communicating, and we did a whole lot of capacity building using Zoom. And it was new learning for everyone. Some trainings we had to have like 3 or 4 concurrent sessions, having a group of facilitators so that we could get the different parts of the country prepared for the response. We use Zoom to educate all the health educators across the state. We used it to engage traditional leaders, religious leaders. We worked a lot with the media also using Zoom. We used it for experience sharing. We even had sessions whereby we were speaking with COVID survivors to be able to share their experience. Another communication platform we used very well was also the phones. We used what we call an interactive voice response, IVRs. So we developed what we call a mobile curriculum. And so we work in the communities. We have volunteers that go house to house to educate people. And we needed them to understand the risk of doing such activities in the midst of COVID, and also making sure they protect themselves. So we rapidly developed what we call a mobile curriculum, whereby we had modules of the health education in spoken in local languages. So we then what we did was record those messages or the communication materials in the different languages. And the use of mobile phone is something that is readily available. And that was used to, so whatever type of phone you had, you didn't have to have a smartphone. but all you had to do was to be able to dedicate like 5 minutes a day to listen. So we asked them to pick what time of the day the phone calls should come in. You didn't have to pay for it. And then you get a call at that time of the day. You listen to your session, you answer the question. So we made it also interactive, engaging. Oh, press 1 if you agree, press 2, what would you do next? And we were able to use that to reach over 3,000 community volunteers that were supporting the work we do. So that was those are some of the ways we communicated or educated during the COVID pandemic.
Oh my God, that was so impressive to hear that. And especially IVRs, that's such a great way to reach a mass audience. And I really love the interactive approach that was there, as well as the Zoom, even connecting with the survivors through Zoom. Sounds very interesting. All right, everybody. So we will continue with the questions in a bit, but for now we have questions for the audience. So now that you've heard of the platforms that were used in Nigeria to handle the pandemic, we have some questions for you on Mentimeter that would where we would like to hear your responses on how you would have reacted. We can go to our first question. Yeah. So everyone, we are just waiting for the Mentimeter screen to show. Yeah. So your question basically is, if let's assume there was an outbreak in your country and there's an announcement of the lockdown, and then if that happens, put yourself in that situation, and then what would be your first reaction? How will you communicate this info with your family, friends, or community? So basically, which social platform would you use to communicate your responses? Kind of expected. We're leaning towards WhatsApp. But interestingly, there are 2 Telegram, which I didn't expect that much. And Facebook and Instagram are not there at all. Instagram is there, 2 Instagram, and yep, it's leaning more towards WhatsApp. But yeah, it was surprising that Facebook is not there at all. Zoom, no. Yeah. Okay, and we have the second question, 2 more questions in Mentimeter after this. So now that we've looked at the platform that you'll use, we have 2 other questions in terms of how you may react to a pandemic or a news around that. So I hope the Mentimeter screen will be up again. All right, so the question is, who should be educated about health? Yeah. Yes. So Olenka will add more to it in a bit. Yeah, because at the moment the answer seems kind of obvious, like, yeah, of course, everybody. But we'll feed into this in a bit. Yeah. And then the third question, if you can go, okay, all right. Once the screen goes to the next question, what was the most challenging situation for you as a caregiver and an educator during this period? So think back to the pandemic, lockdown time, and think back to how that situation, what role did you play? If you had to take care of somebody as a caregiver, how did it look like? And as an educator, what was the role that you played? Um, so what was really most challenging for you during that time? Yeah, dealing with uncertainty, of course, yes. Food supplies, yes. Oh yeah, stress, having factual check of the news. Yeah. Oh yes, the misinformation, disinformation pandemic. Basically, you don't know what to trust. I think that's a great point as well. Yeah, Zoom fatigue. Yeah, how to reach children to ensure they learn through the digital divide. Yes. Being able to attend to the students at the same time, online teaching. Yes. Um, yeah, the how to reach out to students online in equally and make equally the big impact. Providing food. Food has appeared twice, right? Trying to keep myself healthy while caring for someone affected. Yeah, as a caregiver, that's so big, right? Sensory awareness and physical experience to children, giving sensory awareness. Yes, all of that. How do you communicate through digital? Again, a common theme that's coming up. Unable to meet family and all, right? The loneliness and the yeah, that was so huge. That was such a big emotion back then. Uncertainty is again coming up. Tre- Treating like a family will be more nice. As a caregiver, the challenge was to keep myself and everyone in the family safe. Meals, stress, emotional connect too. As an educator, stress and students, yes, some things to handle. Yep. All right. So, Alanka, I hand it over to you in terms of what you would like to share given the responses.
So thank you so much, everyone. I think really great response. And truly, when we talk about who do we need to speak to about health, it's really everyone. But the challenge remains that we focus at a certain level and really find it difficult to get to everyone. And in getting to everyone, we need to understand everyone's uniqueness, the right communication channel, the right communicator, the content, and the context. So yes, everyone is important for health education, and no one should be left behind. Let's take the COVID pandemic or the current COVID situation. And can you hear me? I'm seeing my internet is unstable. Okay,
Yes,
great.
yes.
Okay, so one of the public health social measures is wash your hands. Deepshika, I can't wash your hands for you. You
Yeah.
need to wash your hands yourself.
Yeah.
So you get why everyone needs to be involved in health education. And so everyone has a role to play. And when we look at what we call the socio-ecological model, at the center remains the individual. But we do understand that there are other people that surrounds the individual, and we need to find ways to communicate to the people that surround the individual before you can get to the individual. So you look at family, friends, you look at the communities, you look at the policymakers. They are all different layers of communication. But when we start with health communication, we start at the top. So we're focused on the policies, and before, by the time you get to the individual, maybe there's limited resources to actually get to the individual. I'm looking at a health education whereby the focus starts more on the individual, and that really shows that we need to involve the education sector. The schools need to be an integral part of health education and health communication. We focus more on our traditional religious leaders, the policymakers, and forget the educators themselves, the people within the structured educational system, as a key influencer when it comes to health education. So really great responses from everyone in terms of who do we want to communicate to. And of course, the COVID pandemic, we're still in the pandemic, it's not gone, but we were in critical phases some months back, especially in India, especially across the world, in different places, lockdown, in different places. It was really devastating. And I really I really feel sad on some of the things that happened in India, especially, and the loss of lives that's happened and how it has taken a toll on everyone. And for me, I think my most challenging situation during the COVID pandemic was deciding either to be a mom or to be a public health professional.
Right.
At the onset, it was a tough decision. Yes, there was a lockdown, but as someone that had with public health experience and supporting the national response, I did get a pass, so I could walk around or do my job or be there at the response center, the emergency operations center. And in the same vein, schools had to shut down and we moved to kind of like online schools. And I had a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, and they expected to sit down for an hour or 3 hours to be on Zoom or Google Meet. And please tell me what a 4-year-old could actually assimilate without you as a parent providing that guidance. And it was really a tough choice between, do I contribute to saving the country or focus on sitting down, providing that one-on-one mentoring for my child to be able to participate in the online school. It was a tough choice. I tried in my own best. Get a new computer, get a new table, and there's no way a 4-year-old would sit down or a 6-year-old, and you enter some of those classes and everybody is making noise. And it was also new technology for the teachers, where to mute, how to tell people to control. It was a mess. And so I had to withdraw my kids from school, online school or anything, because there was no way I could combine it all. I was focused on contributing my quota to saving the country in terms of who do we need to talk to, how do we need to communicate, what needs to be done. And it was a tough choice in being there as a parent or being there as a public health responder. And it was really a formative year for my son. And by the time things eased up, schools came back. And I feel like a lot of children within that foundation year, moving from a nursery, I don't know how the education system runs, to the primary year, a lot of them they really lost out on the education. I'm afraid by the time school opened, my son that I expected when my daughter was that age could read, and he can't read, and joining words because they were joining words then. And we're picking up gradually from where we were last year and catching up. But I think majority of us as parents needed to make some choices during that period. Might be the best, might not have been best, but it was a tough choice for me, but happy to have been able to move forward from there.
Yeah. That was really great to hear about the tough choices you made, and my best wishes to the kids who are going through this. So yeah. All right, Alenka. So it has been such a pleasure talking to you. We have come to the close of it. So I'll have my last question for you, and we will wrap up with that. And my question for you is, so what are some recommendations that you have for governments, international bodies to strengthen the health infrastructure to be better prepared for situations like this?
First on my mind would definitely be flexibility in the educational system that allows for continued learning. So education, health infrastructure really, it has to start from within the education system. Like I said, if we take COVID, and one of the key messages is wash your hands, and we were taught, 5 times, or when you eat, when you do this, and we all know that alone, that single washing hands can prevent diseases. To what extent can we really imbibe more of health education mainstream it into the full education, into the educational sector? 2, we have to be prepared for any health emergency. So health infrastructure cuts across different areas. It's really a big scope, so I'm not going to go there. But what I would say in terms of this is that in terms of preparedness and health education, the preparedness starts before something like a pandemic. So you've been communicating effectively, you've been meeting people, you've been understanding their needs. And so that becomes a critical step to take. Then we need to look at ensuring that we're exploring different communication channels, including edutainment, infotainment, in whatever we're doing. And lastly, nothing should ever stop the opportunity to learn, educate, or communicate. We should make sure that that opportunity is always there. The only thing we need to make sure we're doing it safely and in a way that matches your audience. So I'm really grateful for the kind of approach Silora is taking and making education fun, making education inclusive, making education more on, you understand, the child, the individual child itself, like unlike the didactic or current approach that we have that is just a one system, but education can be reimagined for the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alenka. Thank you, and thank you for that very powerful message. Over to you, MC.
So, questions, we will open the floor for questions now. You can post the questions in the chat box, or you can raise your hand and we will unmute you. Okay, so I see a few questions. So the first one is from Fatima Taskeen. In India, we have primary healthcare centers called Anganwadis, which also serve as the early education centers. What are some tips for educators come caregivers in building a stronger foundation for health ed?
Alenka, are you? Yeah.
I couldn't.
Olenka, did you get the question? Do you want me to repeat it?
No, I got the question. I couldn't
Okay.
unmute myself.
Okay, sure.
That's really great question, Fatima. And we do have the primary health centers too in Nigeria, so I can relate with this. The primary health centers really provides an opportunity for health education. And so what would be some of my tips for the educators? One thing is use an integrated approach. So what we currently see is most primary health centers focus on only messages around maybe ANC or counseling for family planning. Again, I'm looking at the context in Nigeria, but every caregiver that comes to a facility or to the hospital or to a health center, there's always an opportunity to educate or provide messages. So either making sure that the health centers have communication materials that speak to the audience. If the healthcare workers do not have such a time to provide this, but for every caregiver that comes to the hospital or to the health center, it's an opportunity to educate. So look at an integrated approach. Look at making sure that you have communication materials that speak to the audience. So it could be posters, it could be radios or something that is playing that helps the client to be entertained while waiting to have the service, and it could be the health talks themselves by the care providers.
Okay, that was a very insightful answer. I hope that answers your question, Fatima. We will take one more question. This is an interesting one from Shabazz. What does a fully health-aware world look like to you?
Thanks, Shabazz. And for me, it's improved health literacy, where health ignorance is not even something up for discussion. So when you look at the definition of health literacy, it's really about the ability and or capacity to find, understand, and easily use health information and services to make informed decisions and take informed action. If everyone could really take their time to understand that health information or health service, then make an informed decision or take an informed action. So you have a headache or you're feeling something, the next thing should be to go or get proper counsel and not maybe kind of like stuck on the internet and getting that kind of information. And so there's a whole lot of misinformation, disinformation going on, but to the extent that you are able to sieve what is misinformation and disinformation, and to the extent that you're able to understand what is being communicated, improved health literacy will be what a fully aware world will look like to me.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much for your responses. And yeah, so I guess with this, we come to the end of this session. And I would really like to thank you, Dr. Olenka and Deepshika, for this wonderful session. It was really informative, and I learned a lot listening to it. And I'm sure the audience also related on multiple fronts and had a really great time. So thank you once again. So we will be moving on now from the fireside chat. And next up, we have paper presentations, which is chaired by Anshul Agarwal. So a quick introduction about paper presentations and how Silray has taken this initiative forward. So Silray has handpicked papers written by students, researchers, and practitioners working in the education domain. They have taken this opportunity to discuss, express, and publish their views on the current trends, challenges, and state-of-the-art solutions addressing various issues in areas relating to education. So a quick intro about our chair, Anshul. Anshul is a gold medalist from Banaras Hindu University, a trained child psychotherapist and a special educator. She has more than 15 years of experience in working with children and is extremely passionate about developmental and learning processes in children. She has a dedicated section on Parent Tree, which is one of the premier parenting websites in India. She has also been associated with schools like Vidya High, India International, Red Bridge, I Play, I Learn, and Little Ellie for workshops and consultations. She also contributes articles on various publications. In addition to Hangout Library, Anchal also runs CL Learning, which focuses on developing skills, learning skills in children. So with this, I would like to move on to the first paper today. The first paper of today is presented by Smita Ganesh and Varshil Chakrapani. Over to you guys to take this forward.
Thank you for that. Good morning, good evening, and good night to everyone everywhere. So it's my pleasure and Smita's pleasure to present our learnings to all of you. And today we're going to talk about capacity building for educators. And these are learnings from our organization, Teach for India, where we work. So a quick introduction about both of us. So Smita and I work with Teach for India Chennai, which is an organization which puts in fellows for a 2-year-long fellowship in government schools and under-resourced private schools, where they act as full-time teachers for a set of students to put them on transformational outcomes. So both of us did our fellowship in different cities, but currently work in Chennai together. And we have spread our job, and now we manage fellows from being fellows. So that's a little introduction about us. Quickly, before we begin, we just want to hear your experience so far. So in the chat box, we will present the link to a particular Slido meter. So you can just go there and type in your responses to the 3 questions that are being asked. And the link is there on the chat. So if you can take the next 1 minute to go and type your responses to that, that will be really great. Okay. There have been responses that have started coming in. We'll take the next 30 seconds. We will move on to the next question in about 10 seconds. Great. I will deactivate this poll and then a new poll will be launched. Just give me a moment. Yeah, you should ideally have the second question up on screen. Okay. Okay. Have about 15 responses. We'll wait for 10 more seconds before moving on to the last question. Okay, great. For the last question, what is your definition of capacity building? Okay, I'm seeing responses as being able to do more. Okay, let's take the last 20 seconds, put in what our definition is: equipping with appropriate learnings and tools. Okay, working from a space of openness, enabling potential to improve the ability to do things. Great, last 10 seconds. Okay, improvement to perform better, to strengthen the mindsets and skills. Okay, thank you all for engaging with that. So here we asked a bunch of questions about how you have experienced training and what is your definition of capacity building. Before moving on about our learnings, I just want to present to you some data about training in general. So if you can see the graph in the next slide. So the graph on the left-hand corner, if you see there, you can see that there's the small red color rectangle there, which is the amount of funding in the budget that is spent on teacher training by Bihar. And if you see other states, you don't even see that red rectangle anywhere, which means that the amount of funding that's spent on teacher training is very minimal. And here on the right-hand side, top corner, if you look at the graph, you can see how there are, that's the number of vacancies currently in government schools across states in the country. And you can see Sikkim has about 60% teacher vacancy and roughly around 30% across the board. And that's the current state of teacher capacity and educator strength in schools. If you see the graph on the top, on the bottom left-hand corner, about 60% of countries, which is shown in red, are the only countries that actually provided training for educators to adopt to the new technologically driven post-pandemic world, which is not a lot of countries. And similarly, NEP mandates only 50 hours of training per year for every educator. So as you know, the pandemic has forced us to change out of proportions. The change is going at a rapid pace, but our own ability to cope up with it or our own training mechanisms is not meeting that, which is the problem that we want to talk about. And this is the learning that we've had at Teach for India. So our problem statement, which comes up on the next slide, is very simple. So change is at a massive scale, which means that the input and the trainings that we focus on are also very systemic. But in our work, we have changed the alternative. We have switched the question to say, what is an alternative we can propose? And we are proposing that small shifts in the way we train people, in the way we coach and support our educators, can lead to long-term sustainable capacity building. And this is exactly what we want to present to you today, how we've gone about capacity building our educators and what is the impact of that also been. Yeah.
With that, when you look at the next slide, you'll see that these are some of the things that we do at Teach for India, where we support our educators, right? What you'll notice here is a couple of like systems and structures that we've set up to support educators, from feedback in classrooms to coaching conversations, a lot of peer learning support. How do teachers actually really zoom out and look at the purpose of education and connect to it, right? While these are explained in detail in our paper, this is just a glimpse of the different support structures that we actually use at Teach for India to support our teachers to bring out their best selves and to feel empowered to teach in classrooms, right? And as you go on to the next slide, you'll notice that over the last decade and through our partners at Teach for India, we've gained clarity and conviction to put children on a path of transformational outcomes, right? And this learning has only solidified. In the next slide, you will notice that teacher development challenges that we've mentioned are based on certain assumptions on how teachers grow best and the capacity to grow through certain hows. Towards strengthening this, we've assumed a few learning bets on how teachers learn best. Yeah, so which means teachers love learning through reading or writing. Teachers love reading through practicing doing or reading and watching. And teachers, do they learn best by knowledge and skills or mindsets, right? And in the next slide, you'll notice that as we really think about, like in India today, monitoring student outcomes is really quick, right? But how often do we monitor how well teachers are really doing in the classrooms, right? How well are teachers growing in their proficiency and skill? And at Teach for India, something we've done that you'll see in the next slide is really strengthen our monitoring and evaluation of how teacher practices actually play out in the classroom, right? And we use our own internal rubric called Teaching as Leadership, where we actually observe teachers in action, in practice, to understand how they're growing on certain skills, right? The other thing we do is also we listen to our teachers. Like, how well is the support really going? How are you feeling about this support? And also use that data through our fellow experience to understand how they're learning and growing and make changes in our training.
And based on whatever we've done, based on the monitoring and evaluation, we have some learnings and some impact that we have achieved. And as we move on to the impact that we've seen, you can see that there's a graph which really puts to perspective the student outcomes and the fellow proficiency as well. So whatever Smita shared about the monitoring and evaluation, we have certain rubrics which gives us certain scores to measure how students are growing holistically and how fellows are also like developing on their own proficiency. So what we did was we did a weighted average on these multiple competencies and developmental outcomes that we look at, and we put that up as a graph. These four graphs show the growth or the weightages over 2 years for both students and fellows. And if you can see the lines, most of it is correlated, in fact, highly correlated. So which goes to say that as educators are developing in their competencies, it also means that students are growing holistically. Yeah. As Smita mentioned, the next slide will also show you how the educators are feeling. So we administer a survey where we ask our educators to tell us about how they're feeling, how supported are they really feeling based on all the inputs that we give. And if you can see across different domains of our ecosystem, you can see that fellows are feeling highly positively about trainings, on an average of 70%, which means that our educators are happy and are ready to engage and involve with trainings, which means that their motivation and purpose really is very high. On the last part of our impact, we not only train and capacity build our fellows or educators for the short term, but also for the long term, which means that they go on to create changes and ripple effects in the education sector. As you can see, about 64%, 65% of our educators continue to stay in the education sector, but their locus of impact is across multiple domains, not only in the school level, but also with organizational development, large scale projects. So which means that they are really capacity built to handle any sort of work anywhere in a very fast changing world. Lastly, our scale of impact is transcending much beyond the individual and has gone even to state level, where we see about 10%, 8 to 10% of our impact being at a state level, with nearly 30% of our impact being at the school level, which means they are really pushing the boundaries for what impact could look like for students and others alike. With this, we have a few learnings which we're taking forward into the work that we do. Yeah. We are asking it as 6 big questions to ourselves, and there have been multiple things that we've gotten right, also some misses as well. We just want to share with you our learnings. Okay. So the first thing that we've learned as we train our educators, it is equally important to focus not only on training with content and pedagogy, but also for how they want to be, who are they, and how do they really show up in spaces. So hence we focus both on skills and mindsets holistically. Secondly, as we speak of capacity building, it is imperative that our educators are able to reflect on their own practices, since always there is not going to be an extrinsic push towards capacity building. It needs to come from within, and hence reflection is one thing we highly bet on as we are looking to continuously capacity build our educators.
Third biggest thing that we've learned that you'll notice is just the role of purpose, right? Like educators derive energy from just having a really strong purpose on why they're doing what they're doing. Our system today doesn't allow us very smoothly to constantly zoom out and look at that purpose, right? But as educators, it's so important to constantly have that purpose so that we know that we have that growth mindset in us to actually continuously learn and capacity build ourselves, right? The fourth thing that we've learned is constantly evolving our vision of excellence, right? In the next slide, you'll notice that what does it really mean to hold a high bar for the children we serve? What does it mean to have a really high rigor for the children we serve? And if that's what we need from our children, how do we hold that mirror to ourselves and say that, are we constantly learning and growing? And is this my best self that I've brought in? And how do we get our teachers and educators to hold that mirror for themselves and learn in a very joyous environment, right? Like Varshit said, some of the misses that we've had is how much is too many inputs, how much is too little time, right? Different learners take different time to actually learn different content. So how do we really differentiate? How do we individualize support to our learners? And how do we really support our educators to actually get that support in that limited period of time? The last miss that we constantly think about is what's the balance between standardization and individualization look like when we capacity build educators? Should across tenure, across age groups in a changing world, should all teachers receive the same support? Or based on learning tenure and ways of learning and how they learn best, how do we individualize support to keep the learner at the center and capacity build from there so that they bring in their best selves, right? With these questions in mind, here's a couple of future work that we're thinking about that you'll see in the next slides, right? We currently operate in 7 cities. We now are going to move into Kolkata, which is our 8th city. Over the next 10 years, our hope is to take our program to as many children, teachers, and educators in the sector to scale with excellence in mind. There's undeniable demand for talent in India's sector today, coupled with an increasing supply of interested youth that are in a lot of desire to create impact, right? And as one of the pioneer fellowships in India, we are well positioned to lay the foundation for a different kind of leadership and a different kind of capacity building that can happen at scale. So scale is something that we're extremely excited about to think about over the next 10 years. The second thing is just communities of practice and collective leadership. We have 3,500 alumni today who are in the region, like Varshit spoke about, who are doing different roles in the sector, right? But what does it take for us to actually learn from each other? What does it really take for educators to come together, very similar like this conference, on their own, to actually learn and have that peer group support system? Here's what I'm learning in my sector. What are you learning? And how do we really have that exchange of thought and ideas, right? That's the second thing we want to build through our communities of practice. Lastly is just autonomy and accountability. Monitoring, evaluation, learning and impact at scale is hard. So how do we really think about teacher training, monitoring and evaluation, which will really help us support our educators in a way that's rooted in data and how they're feeling so that they can grow holistically. That's the last thing that we're going to explore as we think about scale. Thank you so much for listening to us. We're very, very excited to be presenting this to all of y'all, and hope you had a lovely time listening. Thank you.
Thank you, Smita, and thank you, Varshit. So before we move on, I would request Anchal to provide us with few comments or questions that she has.
Definitely. Varshit and Smita, I mean, a great job done at finding out what teachers need in our country, especially. This is something where we all need to strive hard and figure out further what needs to be done. I am, quite impressed to see the kind of research that you have done, especially how teacher training is something on which very little is spent. We all knew that somewhere, but the data definitely was not there. I'm from Bihar, so I was very happy to see that minimal amount is spent in Bihar. And yeah, there are a few things which I see there, which I like in terms of how money is spent on education there. I very much relate to what you said about the mindset and intrinsic push, because as an educator I feel the same, that yeah, skills are needed. We need new information, we need technology to impart that new education, especially in the pandemic time. But the mindset of teachers is something, a mindset of educators, um, that is something which probably where we all need to help teachers change, because training will definitely bring a lot of change in that mindset. My probably a little worry sometimes with educators is, of course, they are, with the right training, they get a lot of informative and technological support. My worry probably for the educators is how much support do they get from their families. This is something where most of the struggle. I do teacher counseling, and I get to hear a lot of these questions that we don't feel supported at home, and this is something where probably we will need to work a little harder in how to change the society's mindset also towards teachers. And I think when that happens, yeah, everything will fall in place.
Thank you, Anshul, for your comments. We will take one question from the audience. You can raise your hand or type it out on the chat screen. I see Vivian is raising her hand, so please unmute yourself. Vivian, are you unmuted? Okay, I don't have a response, so I think we will move on. I have one question in the chat from Anandi. What strategies have you used for mindset change? What are some of the key mindsets you are looking to develop?
So I'll try to keep this very short because there are multiple things we do at the same point of time. So one of the key structures or key inputs we use is peer learning and collective learning as we look to shift mindsets. And we have a setup called the learning circle, where educators frequently come together with each other and try to problem solve, try to share their opinions so that they're learning from each other and also pushing their own boundaries on what opinions they have, what do others bring in, and hence how do we reach either a consensus or you agree to disagree. So that kind of a situation. So learning circles are our biggest bet in order to change our mindsets. The other bet we also have is on coaching conversations. So each of these educators has a dedicated program manager who acts as a coach and a manager for them. And hence, in multiple recurring debrief conversations, we bring up a lot around the ways of being, how are they operating, what mindsets, what beliefs do they operate with. So through these two modes, we try to change a lot of mindsets. Some of the predominant mindsets we've tried to coach on, we've tried to change is around their own belief in the potential of children. Second is their own relationship with dealing with challenge, dealing with change. How are they looking at excellence and really rigor? Other things around how do they manage to keep up with their own pace of working? So there are multiple things that we do as inputs towards this. And these are some common mindsets that we've tried to address with fellows in the past and with educators in the past.
I think one other thing is also, what are they learning about themselves through this? What are some biases they've held? What do they really value, right? Because what you value will show up in different ways in a classroom. If you value voice, you will ensure that many children in your class answer. If you value facilitation, you'll ensure that kids answer more. If you believe you are the provider of all information, then you will only teach and ensure that the kids listen, right? So we really unearth, how do teachers really think? What are their value systems like? What are their beliefs like? What is some unconditioning they need to do? I think that's the coaching piece that happens with our teachers.
I have a question. Is there something that non-educators can do to support and to strengthen the educators community? I mean, what can we do to educate non-educators so that educators feel a little bit more strengthened?
I don't think I have a particular answer to this, but I think one thing that comes to the top of my mind is how do we share what the work that we do? How do we immerse others in the work that we do? That will really show them what it could look like in the life of an educator. A simple thing is like Singapore mandates a year of army training. Can we mandate a month of go volunteer in a school, work with a teacher? I think it's not as simple, but it's not as complex also. So how are we getting them to immerse? I think that's the biggest thing. Or just sit with your child and listen to them. If you're a parent, just do that. I think that will really change the way they look at our work and bring more people to this side as well.
Thank you.
I think visibility is one for me. Like, can we open our doors of learning for different organizations to learn from each other? And the second is just empathy, like how in the shoes of another person to really understand what they're going through, what it's like, and can we do our bit to make the world a little kinder, either for an educator or for a child.
Okay. Thank you, Smita. Thank you, Varshit. Thank you, Anshul, for your questions. The presentation was really, I think for me personally, mind-blowing, because it gave such a great insight into Teach for India. And I'm really glad that, we could host you. And thank you. So the next one, we will move on to our next presentation. And so this is a video presentation as our speaker is not available today, unfortunately. And it's a presentation by Bala Sundaram on the topic of differentiated instruction. So let's move ahead with that.
Hi everyone, I'm Bala Sundaram from Singapore. I was teaching in India for about 11 years in a higher secondary school before moving on to Singapore. I've been teaching in Singapore for the past almost 28 years in a secondary school. Today, I'm going to share my experiences on using differentiated instruction in a mathematics classroom. The impact of differentiated instruction on academic achievements of students in a mathematics classroom. This is my real topic for today's presentation. Differentiated instruction is not something very new. People have been already practicing in different classrooms. So my experiences in a maths class. Actually, we undertook a project in our maths department. The aim of the project was to study the impact of differential instruction lessons on academic achievement of students. Our belief is that the DA lessons will improve students' results in mathematics. When I say results, I don't mean just the test results and also the learning, right? How does it? For all the students. That's what I mean. One size doesn't fit all. So we have to really keep in mind the varied abilities, the mixed abilities in a classroom. Not only in a mathematics classroom, other classrooms as well as, but my experience is only of a maths classroom. We did a simple literature review on differential instructions. We know that the students learn better if tasks are close match for their skills and understanding. When I say close match, it also means the readiness of the students, the readiness to learn a subject. A good readiness match pushes the student a little beyond his or her comfort zone and provides a support in bridging the gap between the known and the unknown. This is a quote from Tomlinson, who is well known for her work on differential instruction. She's an American educator, author, speaker, and has many in her profile. In many classrooms around the globe, the approach to teaching is more unitary than differentiated. What does it mean? It's the same thing what I mentioned earlier. It's a direct instruction which is traditionally followed in all the classrooms. Students are all not alike when it comes to learning. There are individual differences, different capabilities to learn, and also mixed abilities as well. So the students cannot be the same in a classroom of, say, 30 or 40 students. So they have different, caliber, different capabilities to learn. Three characteristics of students that guide differentiation are readiness, interest, and learning profile. We will talk about this learning profile later. DA represents a drastic paradigm shift that drastically changes the way teachers teach mathematics. This is another quote. Among those students with identified learning challenges, no two are ever the same. Same point is repeated. The idea is the classroom has always students of mixed abilities. This slide shows a simple comparison between direct instruction and differentiated instruction. Direct instruction is usually teacher-centered. Teacher leads, students will follow. Differentiated instruction, student-centered. Students also take the responsibility for learning, and also the needs of students are taken care as well. Direct instruction is single modality. It is one directional, unidirectional. Differentiated instruction can be multiple modality. You can have different techniques, different strategies for applying differentiated instruction. Direct instruction is mass directed instruction, meaning the same thing is delivered, the same method of teaching is delivered to the entire class, irrespective of their varied abilities. Whereas differential instruction focuses on varied instruction. Let me explain later how the instructions can vary from person to person or individual student to another student. It's an action research which we carried out in a maths classroom. I call it mini because it's a very small scale using a very small population, sample population. The research hypothesis is DI lessons improve learning process in mathematics for grade 9 students. This was a research question. Do DI lessons improve learning process in mathematics for grade 9 students? Actually, what we mean here is, does it have any impact in the learning process? Let me explain how the lesson involving differentiate instruction was carried out. Using the ABC approach, A group means advanced ability group, the students who are very comfortable in learning the subject. The B group means the middle ability group, we call it medium group, which is normally the majority of the classroom. C group means low ability group, I just call it as crying just to match with C. So these are the people who really need a lot of support and help in learning. So we classify the whole class into 3 different groups. It's not necessary to have 3 groups. You can have 2 groups. It depends on the topic as well. The lesson is usually pitched at the level of B group, right? Students, I mentioned already, this is the majority of students in a classroom setting. A group is usually neglected. The reason neglected I'm using is they are not taken care of, in the sense sometimes they go ahead of the peers. They learn faster than others. So the pace is not the same. So they are not taken care of. The C group is the one really below the line. So these people need a lot of support, I mentioned already. So these are the varied abilities in a classroom. If it's a direct instruction, all are not taken care of. But in differential instruction, each one can be given special attention or special method of teaching. That's what the DI really helps. I'm going to talk about my DI lesson, how I carried out the specific instructional objectives from the lesson, are stated here. It's a topic on indices and related to compound amount based on indices as well. So these are the specific instructional objectives. While solving questions on indices, students have difficulties at different levels. So each one has a different understanding level. So the help required is not the same for everyone. So the approach is differential instruction, and also instructional scaffolding is something which I employed. It's a process which teacher adds support for students in order to enhance learning and aid in the mastery of the task. So for instructional scaffolding, various levels of support will be provided for solving problems. Students had some prior knowledge of the topic on indices. A pre-test was administered to identify the levels of difficulty. So based on the pre-test evaluation, students were classified into 3 categories, as I mentioned earlier, A, B, and C, and differentiated worksheets were crafted based on the 3 groups, the levels of difficulty, and the differential worksheets actually had the instructional scaffolding process in it. So the help given in the differential worksheets were of different levels. The worksheets were given to students through Google Classroom without letting them know about the differentiation, because differential instruction is not to discriminate between the students. We don't want them to know they have been classified. So the worksheets were given to them without letting them know about the differentiate instructions. So each one had different instruction in the worksheet, and they had to solve the questions and we spot the mistakes before the end of 1 hour lesson. So this is the intervention strategy which was followed. The worksheets had the same questions, but the structure of the worksheet was different for the different groups. So this is a sample worksheet given to A, which is an advanced group, and also needed minimum support from the teacher. This is a worksheet given to the B group students, medium level. The same worksheet, but some more help provided compared to the group A students. But still they had to solve the question by themselves with a help provided. This is a worksheet given to the group C students who need more support, more scaffolding from the teacher. So this worksheet you may not be able to see very clearly on the screen, but you can see the kind of the steps in between steps right provided for them to work it out. All the three worksheets, as I told you, had the same questions, but different levels of help provided to them. After this intervention, a post-test was administered, but the questions were not the same as the pre-test, but the test items were the same. So post-test was evaluated, and we did a comparison, we did some analysis. You can see students' work. I'm just presenting this as an artifact. This is another artifact. I have purposely covered their names to protect their identity, but you can see their work and the marking. So on the left hand side, you see the pre-test. On the right hand side, you can see the post-test. The test items are the same. Questions are different, but you can see the changes, or you can see the improvement between the two tests for the same student. This slide shows the pre and post-test analysis. If you take a very close look at the slide, the same student, right? The students' names are covered to protect their identity. It's the entire class result. So for the same student, you can see the changes. You can see the improvement between the pre and post test. I won't say all students have improved, but majority of them have shown improvement. For example, question number 1. 10 scored full marks in the post test. 13 scored full marks in the post test. Again, for question 3, also 13 scored full marks in the post test. So there were 19 students overall in the class. So the improvement shown is about 87.5% overall average compared to the pre-test. We set the success criterion as 50%, meaning if the overall average improves by 50% compared to the pre-test, we consider the differential instruction strategy has succeeded. So in my case, 87.5% is the improvement shown compared to the pre-test. Means the students have learned. As the time given to me is only of 15 minutes, and I'm unable to elaborate more and more, but I can tell you the differentiated instruction strategy worked very well in my case. So what are the strengths? A teacher will teach one topic to a class but give each student a different learning experience. The differentiated instruction approach is focused on ensuring content and learning environment are flexible to the needs of the students. What we mean is we really take into account the students' readiness as well as their learning profile. Class is more equitable because the teacher gives every student due consideration for what the learning needs really are. So these are some strengths of differential instruction strategy. Challenges, it's time consuming. Time consuming meaning the same topic which you could have done in, for example, 1 hour duration through the direct instruction will require double the time. So that's why it becomes a time consuming process, but more effective. Resource intensive, in the sense you have to create varied worksheets or varied learning materials to suit the learner's needs. So this is a real challenge. So if you can overcome these challenges, the differential instruction strategy can be really a successful one. But you don't have to do all the lessons through using DI strategies. Whenever required, wherever required, this can be employed. Here I'm showing you some references for you to read more about differential instruction strategies. You can just take a close look at all these references. If you further have any questions or any queries, please don't hesitate to contact me via email or by WhatsApp. Thank you so much for your audience. Have a great day.
Thank you, Balasundaram, even though he's not present with us today. So I hope everybody took note of his contact information if they have any questions, as we cannot have them addressed today. But I would like to give the floor to Anshul for any comments she has on the presentation.
Thank you, Srinidhi. It was a much needed talk here about differential instructions, which in very simple terms means how we can tailor our instructions, how we can change our instructions in the classroom to meet individual needs of each child there. And as he has pointed out very well that it works, even though the challenge is that it is time consuming and that not all teachers might be trained to handle that, and um it could delay the whole chapter learning, because one single chapter or one single concept might take a longer time, but it is definitely very, very helpful. And as he has also pointed out, the ABC, wherein the A is the above average, C is the below average, and B is the average, which is the bell-shaped curve we call in psychology, the normal distribution curve. That is the norm. That is the 70% people fall in that category, and how our systems are tailored to meet the needs of that 70%, the B. And the above average might feel left out because they are way up ahead, and the below average also will feel left out because they are not able to cope up. So the problem is not only with the C category, the below average, but also with the above average, because they also feel that they get frustrated because they tend to learn faster and they are not able to, and those are also sometimes the ones who turn, who become mischief makers in the classroom because they are ahead. I appreciate the efforts that Mr. Balasundaram has put into the research. It is very extensive and very, very much needed. And I hope we can impart this understanding to all the educators around, that how tailor-made instructions, not concepts. Concepts need not be changed. Concepts level need not go down to meet the child. But what he's talking about is keeping the same concept, but instructions become more supportive to meet each child's needs. And I appreciate the research done, and I hope it reaches to all parents and teachers around.
Thank you, Anshul, for your comments. I see a question in the chat window. How does the teacher enable screening the child to know whether she has been categorized under ABC category? This, I think, is a good question to think about. And also, I see his Balasundaram's email ID is being posted here. So I request everybody to take note of this if they have any further questions. I myself have a question actually after going through his presentation, which I would like to share. My school actually tried out this differentiated instruction thing. And I think one of the problems that we were able to see was that at the end of the exam session, when kids came out with the different question papers in their hands, like, and comparison obviously happens, right? And at this point, like, you have the question paper that is for, the type A students. Even though it might have been challenging for them, they might have done exceedingly well. but and the type C student would feel really discouraged looking at that, and feeling as if they are falling behind, or like like feeling of maybe they're not doing enough or they're not doing well. So I think this is a question I would really like to ask him. So how do educators deal with this issue of giving the children the right support, but at the same time, like, boosting the morals equally for everybody?
Hmm.
So yeah, so once again, I would encourage everybody to take note of his contact and uh, reach out with all the questions that you have. And also, another point that I would like to make is that these papers will be online on the Silray website in a couple of days. So if any of you, go back and think about these questions and, have further thoughts, or you want to refer to these papers again, you'll be free to like look them up and, contact the owners of these papers, right? So I think up next we have one more paper, which is on a very interesting subject. But again, I think the speaker couldn't make it today. So the paper is on a survey on school teachers' awareness towards NEP 2020 in Gomati district, Tripura, by Dr. Nandita Chakraborty. Again, I think this paper will be published on the website. So I really request everybody to check it out in a couple of days and go through it yourselves. So with this, we'll be coming to the end of the paper presentation session. And I really want to thank the speakers and Anshul. And thank you. And this was really informative. So we will move on from here now. Sorry, Anshul, do you have any closing remarks to add?
Okay. The last presentation, you are not showing the video or anything?
No, we don't have the video, and our speaker couldn't make it today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. The entire event is wonderful. It brings everybody together, all educators who have been doing a lot in their own respective ways and fields. The effort put here to bring everybody together has been commendable. Uh, the talks on health infrastructure being a part of our basic education system, I think that is one big mindset change that we all, as parents, as educators, as a society, we need to have that how in our basic education system, some talks on health and very strong notions of self care should be there, and that will take care of a lot of things in here. The talks on how teachers need to be enabled more is was really moving. And as educator, I can relate to that. As a mother, I can understand the frustrations of a teacher, frustrations of students and parents, and how what everybody wants is ultimately best for the kids. And somewhere we all are doing our best for the kids, and we just need to collaborate a little bit more and have we were talking about empathy in education. We also need to have that the whole system of empathizing and system of being kind towards the educator. That is where I, as an educator, I also would want to understand more ways in which the society can have a different empathetic mindset towards educators, because that is somewhere I feel is lagging, which is very discouraging for many educators. Like there was a mention of teachers quitting very easily, easier than other jobs, right? So these things need to change. We need to have a little bit more respect and towards the education industry, towards people who want to get into education as their first choice. This is something where the mindset of society needs to change. And I'm very hopeful that with the kind of work that all the educators here are doing, will bring that change. So this is something probably we all need to look forward to.
Thank you so much, Anshul, for your final closing remarks. Um, Once again, this has been a really great session, and I'm sure everybody in the audience has learned a lot. So we're at this point halfway through the session, and for all of our audience from India, we're getting later into the night, right? So um, at this point, we would like to take a quick engagement to just see how all of you are feeling right now. Right. So if I can have the Mentimeter on screen.
Srinidhi, I think let's start the panel. We have one of the speakers who needs to leave. So we'll do the interaction maybe after that.
Okay, sure. Okay, so then we'll move on to our next session, right? I'll quickly go over the speakers. Yeah. Up next is a session on fostering empathy, conversations with Sujata Nambudiri, Shweta Desi Raju, Niyata Krishnan, and which is moderated by Subha Parthasarathi. Sujata Nambudiri is an engineer turned early childhood educator. She is an alumni of IIT Kanpur 1998 with a master's degree in civil engineering. She is also the founder and executive director of Vidyaram, an Indian cultural immersion preschool in Bay Area, California. Sujata is the mother of 3 children who inspired her to switch her career to child development. She founded Vidyaram in 2015 for her third child, Shrivas, who was then a 3-year-old child. It was started as a licensed family childcare program in her home, serving 6 families per year. Vidyaram currently has 2 beautiful campuses in Bay Area, serving a total of 300 families per year. Vidyaram focuses on the holistic development of children. Since Vidyaram was started for her own son, every aspect of Vidyaram has been planned through the perspective of a parent who wants the best of everything for her child. Sujata is working towards completing her associate degree in child development from De Anza College, Cupertino, California. She hopes to graduate next year. Shweta Desi Raju is a psychologist, behavior therapist, founder, and CEO of Brightside Foundation. Shweta Desi Raju is a psychologist with a specialization in clinical psychology. She is passionate about the field of neurodevelopment disorders and is currently working in the same area. She's the founder of the Brightside Foundation, a mental health NGO based in Telangana. Through the Brightside Foundation, she aims to shift the perspective from mental health stigma to mental health support. She has also been a social activist for the last 4+ years, working on projects for empowering women, promoting education, normalizing menstrual health, and increasing awareness about suicide prevention. Niyata Krishnan is a versatile education and leader with over 30 years experience in teaching and school leadership. She has worked in different sectors within the education space, including project management for an NGO. Widely traveled, she has visited over 25 countries across 5 continents. For the past 8 years, she has been working as the head of an international secondary school for girls in Nigeria. They are a day-end boarding school with the mission of providing a wholesome and holistic education for the girl child, enabling them to be lifelong, resilient, and tenacious global learners, pursuing excellence in all spheres of life. She's passionate about helping students discover their strengths and succeed in their chosen fields, advocacy for mental health in the community, mentoring and motivating staff to go beyond their best and achieve success and fulfillment. Last but not the least, Subha Parthasarathi has been working with children, parents, and adults for the last 14 years. She's a counselor with over 20,000 hours of counseling adults and children in one-on-one sessions. She's the founder of Magic Hive. Subha is an experienced trainer and facilitator who delivers workshops and programs with a focus on enriching relationships with self and others. Her workshops, Chetana and Compassionate Communication NVC, are centered around increasing self-awareness and equipping participants with tools and insights that help them have an enriching life. Join me in welcoming the panelists for the next session.
Thank you, Srinidhi. Are you able to hear me? Yes. Okay. So good evening, good night, good morning, good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much, Silre team, for having me here. And one of my favorite topics, empathy. And it was, the paper presentation that was done just before and what Anchal shared in the end, it kind of matched up with what we are going to be discussing today, the empathy. And one of the questions she had asked to Smita and Varshit was, how can non-educators be empathetic, or give that space to people who are in that education space trying to do something, or that was a very pertinent question. And I think that sets the whole platform for today's discussion. So thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to uh, in knowing from our panelists what they think about empathy. How do we foster it? What is the importance of it in this education space that we are talking about? And so I'm going to just start right away. So my first question would be to all the panelists, is that, what according to you is empathy? Because this is a word that is being thrown around a lot, and it has come, even more with the COVID thing. And we are all talking about empathetic environment, empathetic workplace. What does that really mean, for you? So I'm curious to understand personally, what does this word empathy mean for you? What does it look like for you? What does it sound like for you? And also, what is it that makes it so important right now that we are talking about this, that we are wanting to have conversations around it? So I would like to start with Niyata. Niyata, would you like to share?
Yeah. Hi, Shubha. Hi, everybody else. It's great to be here on this platform to talk about something which is I'm really very passionate about. For me, empathy is, everybody, it's a kind of a cliche to say that put yourself in somebody else's shoes, but how exactly do we do that? It's like Dr. Brené Brown says that, you see somebody in a deep hole and you're still outside there looking down on them, not really sharing in their pain. And that's kind of a sympathetic approach. You see, yes, you feel sorry for them, but you're really not there for them. But if you're an empathetic person, you're actually climbing down into that hole and making yourself vulnerable to their pain and listening to them. And, it's not about offering solutions. It is just to show that, yes, you are there. You're there to listen. And if there is any way you can help, you're there. It's not about it's not about providing a solution at first, because we know that most people in pain, they are not looking for solutions. They are just looking for some kind of understanding. They are looking for somebody who's emotionally available. So for me, empathy, I would say, is being emotionally available. And then to the second part of your question, about why we are having these conversations in this, it's not exactly post-pandemic, but yes, we've been through the worst of it, I hope. All of us were locked down, we were alone, we were cut off from our loved ones, and online working has been very difficult and it's been very intensive. Some of us have been working like 28 hours in a day, if that is possible. And it really, let me colloquially to say, it really messed up with a lot of people's mental health, because there were no boundaries. And so now, at some point of time, all organizations started realizing that there was a real burnout, and we really need to support our people in getting through this. And not just colleagues, it's also the children. The children were burnt out. Dr. Olainka said that there was Zoom fatigue. So, not to take up all the time, but basically we understand that there has to be a lot of support for each other amongst us as a community. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Niyata. It reminds me of something I read that day. It says, I think Henry David said that could a greater miracle take place than for us to look at each other's eyes for an instant? So I think that kind of, sums up a lot about what we are talking about, what you just shared in terms of being, that empathy part. Yeah, Shweta, would you like to share what it means for you?
A very, very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. I'm Shweta Desiraju, and I'm extremely honored to be here to talk about empathy. And I'm especially stoked because of the way Splendor is trying to connect empathy and education. Because educators, they have the fortune to not only contribute to the intellectual development of children, but also to the social development and emotional development of children. When we talk about empathy and educators, it is extremely important for educators to be empathetic because when an educator, when a teacher, a lecturer, or a professor is being empathetic in a classroom, it is so important for the students. It creates a safe space and a nurturing environment for the students because when we talk about a school, or let's say when we take a classroom, we have students coming in from different backgrounds. We have students coming in from various cultural backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, socio-economic backgrounds, and they come from different situations happening in their own houses. So when they come to school, when they come to a class, and if they see their teacher or their educator creating a safe and a nurturing environment for them with empathy, they create that space for each other, and they don't just do it in the classroom, but the best thing about students is that they take it to the community outside, they take it to the society. So when an educator is being empathetic, the educator is not only creating a safe space for the students, but the educator is building a very strong community through empathy. And when these students see a classroom being led with empathy, they grow up to become leaders. They grow up to become strong leaders who can lead teams with empathy. They try to understand the people they are leading. They try to be empathetic towards the people they are leading, and together it fosters empathy all around, and it creates strong communities. So I believe that empathy is all the more important, and it's an extremely powerful tool when we talk about education.
Thank you, Shweta. And it also comes across in your voice how strongly you believe in this whole concept and how you want to do something in that area. Thank you so much. Yeah, Sujata, you're on. What does it mean for you?
Thank you. Namaste, everybody. Honored to be here. Yes, I am working mainly with very young children under the age of 6. 1 to 6 year olds is that I work with. And I also obviously work with the teachers in the classroom as well as parents who are raising these children. So for me, when I was invited to this panel discussion about fostering empathy, I was again reflecting on what does empathy mean to me. So for me, empathy is being non-judgmental, because I see in many classrooms, children are being labeled as a trouble child, oh, he is a problematic child or trouble child, and it's so hard. And, that is something that I have heard a lot. So it's, instead of labeling a child as a troubled child, teachers need the training to understand what could be the reason behind the challenging behavior that the child is exhibiting. What is the child's challenge in demonstrating the feelings that he is going through, expressing the feelings that the child is going through, that emotions, and how to teach that child to express it in a socially acceptable manner, those kind of things. teachers need training, and as well as parents need counseling and support. And this topic is so important at this time. After the pandemic, many families had to keep the children at home for more than a year. And young children, I'm talking about very young children, like from birth to 5 years, they are so energetic and they want to socialize, and they need people to talk to them and acknowledge them and validate their feelings and everything. But poor children had to be cooped up inside the four walls of their house, and with parents who are struggling to balance working from home and raising these children, taking care of their needs. And it was very challenging time during the pandemic. And we see that ripples in children as well. They are emotionally affected. Many children are speech delayed. Young children lost that crucial of verbal development. So this is the time to be more empathetic to the families and children. And I see that on a daily basis in my classrooms.
Thank you, Sujata. What comes out to me across of what all the three of you shared is that, empathy just goes beyond even just, just saying, okay, walk in somebody else's shoes. It goes beyond that. It's basically saying that, we need to see each other as more, as human beings, and be there for each other in the path that we are walking. How can we understand what's going on with the other person and be there, give our full presence, to each other, whether it is a child or whether it is an adult. So I'm just curious to know from the audience out here, what came out for you when you heard our three speakers talk about empathy in terms of in relation to education or in relation to children. What came out for you? So maybe you could just give us some pointers and then we can take it forward. We could wait for a few more. Yeah. Yeah, true. It is very important. We do accept that. But we find it challenging to implement it. Yes, be available, understanding, being emotionally present, and take action to support. The action is also required as a follow-up. Yeah, non-judgmental presence with their feelings. Yeah, so we are kind of agreeing to what even the speakers said, that, empathy is something that we need to look at. We need to have more conversations about it. And I think we need to go beyond those conversations to be able to develop that skill to implement it, not just with others, but even with ourselves. I think many of us miss out being empathetic towards ourselves, and we are more focused on giving empathy to others, and then we are burnt out. And that is when it goes downhill. So I think it is caregivers, parents, educators, all of us need that empathy, need to be understood, need to be seen, and need to be cared for. Thank you so much for the inputs. So we move on to the next question, which is as important. It is about the learning. So I was reading a book. I didn't read it completely, but it was very interesting what caught my eye. It's a book called Range by David Epstein. I don't know if you guys have heard. So he talks about learning environments. So he talks about kind and wicked. So we are talking about a learning environment which is kind. So I look at it as an empathetic environment. So if the learning environment, the way we look at learning environment nowadays is, put everybody in a room and tuck, 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 learn. But are they really learning, or is that learning, can we have an alternative way of learning? And how does having an empathetic environment where you are working from that understanding for children, how does it affect the learning outcomes? Does it affect, and how does it affect? So, Niyata, you're on.
Yes, the learning environment. Okay, what is a learning environment? What is a school? Or what is the learning space you're going into? It's not just, education is not about just purveying of knowledge. Life skills, important life skills are learned in schools, which contribute to the molding of students into resilient, adaptable, and innovative problem solvers with global citizenship qualities, because it's now practically a global village. So it's very important to take any learning that happens in the classroom out of the four walls context. And what does empathy have to do with it? Empathy has everything to do with it. First of all, I feel there are two major reasons empathy is required especially in an educational space. When all the adults we are all caregivers. When we work in schools or institutions of learning, we are all caregivers. So we have young minds who are looking to us as role models. When they see all the people in the community working empathetically with each other, there is a lot of synergy. And that's a great lesson. That's a great lesson for them to take, that this kind of approach is what actually makes for a good collaborative working space. And the outcomes are high outcomes are achieved. And again, in the classroom, how does empathy help? You know where each child comes. It doesn't have to be like you're getting personal with them, but it does help to understand the feelings of each child. Like, for example, there was a child in the class who, like Sujata said, people tend to label children. So she's slow. She doesn't like to get started on work. So for me, it was that when I enter the class, go straight to that child, not really like everybody knows that one is doing that, but yes, the child feels very cherished, and you say that, oh, you've started here, and you've got such a beautiful handwriting. And yes, are you saying my handwriting is beautiful? I said, yes, of course, your handwriting is beautiful. When you start to write, you really write beautifully. She says, oh, nobody ever told me that. And that changed what she did. She started looking at herself in a different way. So that's empathy for you. It's just a small example of empathy. Every single child in your class has a different background. Mr. Balasundaram talked about differentiation. Differentiation cannot be done if you don't have that empathy. That you are not looking at children with that lens of empathy. So what does empathy do to the child? It gives the child a sense of belonging, a confidence, and feeling supported. So, and for me, I want to go back to a science lesson, a fire triangle. In order to make fire, you have to have, there are three things you need. You need a supporter of combustion, that's the fuel. You need a fuel, you need a supporter of combustion, which is oxygen, and you need the right temperature. Now, when you think about objects that burn, that give light, let us look at a candle or a lamp. You have, a candle is never just a wick or the wax. These two things, if you just light them, they would just burn so quickly, and there is nothing left. There is no sustained light. But when the wick and the wax, together they work, the light, it burns in a sustained manner. So for me, learning is like that. You are teaching in class without empathy, or you're just all empathy and there's nothing else going on in the classroom, there's hardly going to be any learning. But when solid pedagogical practices are combined with an empathetic approach, I think there is a lot of sustained learning, and learning outcomes definitely improve. So that's my take on empathy in the education space. Thank you.
Thank you, Niyata. Sujata, you are also in the same space working with children of the younger age. So what comes up for you when Niyata is sharing about the empathetic environment?
Yeah, so when we talk about empathetic environment for young children, what I'm reflecting on is like children with behavioral challenges. How do we support them in the environment of the classroom, right? So one thing is, of course, we have to start with the teacher who is educated and who is able to recognize the child's challenge and able to support that child emotionally. And another thing is about supporting the child. Sometimes I'm talking about young children who may not be able to communicate. So giving them tools to communicate, like, okay, visual tools, having a visual routine up for the child, and having visual expectations for classroom behavior for the child, and also conflict management tools, like when the child is having a conflict with another child or teacher or parent or whatever is going on with the child that day. Child is clueless about talking about expressing it because that child doesn't have the language skill to express. So we have to give them visual tools, like we in our classrooms have emotion chart or pictures attached to a popsicle stick. So the child can pick up and show, I'm sad or I'm angry. Instead of saying that, the child can just show us that, okay, this is how I'm feeling and I need your help. And we assure the child that we are there for you. We just want to know how you're feeling, and then we can help you, instead of throwing tantrum or breaking toys and throwing things around. And this is a better way to communicate to us if you don't have the language. So we support in different ways. And we also give training to the teachers in supporting children, because we are again working with very young children with limited language skills. So that is one way we address that.
So it does help in terms of the learning outcomes when children are learning. When you use all these tools, it helps them to express and also have the safe environment where. So do you see that affecting the learning process also when they, you see some difference in terms of their learning also?
Absolutely. In most cases, there are exceptions who need better intervention from experts in the behavioral therapy and all that. But in most children, we have seen tremendous effect when they feel supported, when their feeling is validated, and they see that, okay, help is there for me when I need. And that boosts their confidence, and that brings that security for the child, and children thrive in such an environment. The best out of them come out.
Thank you, Sujata. So coming to you, Shweta, you work in the space of, where children are diagnosed with neurodevelopmental disorders. So if there is an empathetic environment, does it affect, how does it help? How does it impact their learning process?
So when we talk about the field of neurodevelopmental disorders, there is this very famous saying, and this is something that I practice in our clinic as well. It goes like, if you meet one child with autism, you are only meeting one child with autism, because it affects every child differently. And this is where empathy plays a key role, because as a therapist, if I'm treating all my children who are diagnosed with ASD or ADHD in the same way, then it means I'm doing injustice to them, because each child is different. So it starts by understanding the child genuinely. So it is important for us, it is important for all the caregivers to genuinely try to understand the child first, to put in efforts to actually understand how the child is feeling, what the child is lacking, what the child's strengths are. That is something that we often forget. We have to understand the strengths of the child as well. So when we try to understand that each child is unique and each child has their own individual personality, that is when we are trying to be empathetic towards them. And the first step in being empathetic towards a child, being empathetic towards any person, is genuinely trying to understand the person. So when you try to understand the child, you try to develop a plan, a treatment plan, or a learning procedure, or a class schedule for the child that helps that particular child. So you see the child flourishing in so many ways than what is expected. So I think I personally strongly believe that our first step should always be to understand each person genuinely, to put in efforts to try to see what the person is going through, and only then we will be able to empathize with them. We will then be able to create safe spaces for these children, and we will see them flourish.
Thank you, Shweta. That was very insightful. When we are talking about all this, one thing that's coming up is that we are focused a lot on children, giving them the space, being empathetic. Now I come to the adults, right? So one thing what you said was learning to be understanding of others. The issue that I see even when I'm working with people, the issue I see is that as adults or when we were children, we have not received empathy. We have received criticism, we have received extreme praise, or it has been external, where everything external affects our being. So when we have certain feelings as we are growing up, it has been suppressed, or it has been ignored, or it has not been seen. We have not been seen. Now we come to a space where we are working with children. So what are your thoughts on, as an adult, when I have not received empathy, how do I give empathy? So what is it that we could do differently to start working in that space, or what are your thoughts around it, that how do we build that community where adults are aware of what empathy is, they are receiving it, and then they are able to give it with more ease and comfort. Otherwise it is something like an effort. I hear a lot of, when I work with parents, they say, "Arey yaar, it's so much of an effort." Like somebody said, I can't be consistent. I mean, in one situation I may give empathy and the other I lose it, and then the child says, "You know what, you're not consistent, so I'm not receiving what I want to receive." So how do we work in that space? What is it that you think that we can do as adults, or even as a society, as a community? What are the things that we can do to develop that, empathetic culture or environment around us? Anybody can share.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that question, Shubha. I think when working with, yes, we are working with children, like you said, but then it's a body of adults who are taking care of young children, and it is like, it's a kind of a tripod where the school and the home work together for the betterment or for the growth of the child. So, and in the school, we have so many different care, people who are attending to the children, who academic and support staff, the admin staff, everybody. So it is important that we all need to work with each other, and it takes. It's like somebody said, it's easy and not as difficult as it looks if you just decide you must do it. So the thing is that if you anything which happens, if you step back and look at it, look at the person or look at the circumstances which led to that happening, and you try to understand and not make others feel threatened, so that they know that you're not judging them. It's very important. You, you take yourself out of the situation, set aside your own reaction, and then if when you have to give feedback, you can say that, instead of saying that you did this in a wrong way, say that I think that if you had done it this way, you might have had a better outcome. And you give, you speak less and you listen more. So they know that you are a safe person, that who they can talk to. And most of the time it is communication. Once they know that they can say something, they're also open to what you might be able to offer as a solution. But we can't jump into the fix-it mode. First of all, you need to get the communication right, and they know that you are a person to be trusted. So if everybody in the community is able to behave in that fashion, I think empathy is a skill which can be learned. It's, as you said, we did not grow up with a lot of empathy. Our parents just brought us up, and so, but we cannot do that because we know the benefits of empathy. And I think by creating more and more instances where you show empathy to people, empathy can be taught. You can be a role model for people to practice empathetic approaches with everybody. And then, I think it's very important to allow people to know that reaction is never a good thing. You need to respond to the situation. So that has been working for me a lot. And I keep, when it comes to especially labeling children, I always take the back seat. I say, no, it's not a label that we want here. We want to see what is actually going on, and we want to address that. Thank you.
Thank you, Neta. What I'm hearing you say is mindful language, maybe a bit of pause in when we are getting into the space of reaction, and that could help, bring that shift that we are looking at in terms of creating that environment which is more compassionate and understanding of each other. Thank you so much. Yeah, Shweta, Sujata.
Yes, I couldn't agree more with what Niyata has said. It makes 100% sense. To add on to this, it is actually very inspiring that people who have not received empathy or understanding or safe spaces while growing up are now determined to create those spaces for the children of tomorrow. It is absolutely inspiring. And this is exactly where the concept of self compassion comes into place. So, self compassion is extending the compassion that we always give to others inwards. So, it is as simple as if you see somebody else going through a tough time, or if you see somebody else failing, we try to be very compassionate towards them. We try to be very understanding. We give them very kind words. But when it comes to us, we don't tend to be so kind to ourselves. So if we start by being so kind to ourselves, by being compassionate towards ourselves, then we do not burn out, and it is easier for us then to give compassion to others, to give the empathy to the children of tomorrow. So I believe that the key is self compassion.
Absolutely. And I think many of us will agree that that's the most challenging thing to do. Yeah, thank you, Shweta. Yeah, Sujata, anything you would like to add?
Something small, like when I mean, I feel like now in the news present situation generation, there is a need for empathy to be part of the curriculum. We, at least my I'm from the older generation here. I deal with the young parents and very young children. So compared to them, I had the experience of living in a joint family, or having opportunity to interact with many cousins and relatives. But now we are more nuclear families, and children are becoming more and more self-centered. They are losing the power to think about others, which is empathy, because there is no opportunity, very less opportunity in their families. So it is becoming more and more important to make it part curriculum in preschools, because that is a tender age where we inculcate these values. So as an early childhood educator, I'm being more and more mindful about that.
Thank you, Sujata. Thank you so much. I think what comes out very clearly is that we need to start seriously developing these skills, and we also need to learn how we can be kind to ourselves, and that's the place to start, like Shweta said. I completely agree with that, and it reminds me of what I read in one of the books, which prompted me to buy the book, was a book written by Valerie Kaur, and she says, "See no stranger." So she says, "You are a part of me I do not know yet." And I think with that, we will open it up for the audience to, ask any questions or share their thoughts on what is their takeaway from the session, or is there something coming up for them that they would like the panelists to give their perspectives. So please do share your questions and thoughts so that we know what is going on with you. Thank you so much. I can see a question by Fatima. As a residential school, how do you support adolescent teenage challenges empathetically? Are educators sufficiently equipped to handle this? So I think this is for you, Niyata.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. Thank you for that question. It's a beautiful question because it's something that we are doing day in and day out. We in my school, we consider ourselves as, it's not just the teachers who are educators. Everybody in the community is an educator. So we believe in every single person the students come into contact with should be able to relate to them in an empathetic fashion without being judgmental. And this is only possible when people understand, because it's, again, you people cannot give what they don't have. So it's very important for us to continuously train and train all the people in our community about how they relate with children. First of all, sometimes with some people it just has to be the transactional training, how you do it, and then they start thinking about why they are doing it. And with some other people you have to say why they are doing it, but as an organization we have to put down certain expectations from the people who are taking care of the children, that this is how we relate with the children. And then we support that. Around that we have a lot of trainings. We do a lot of trainings. We even have trainings every morning. Every morning at 7:30 before school starts at 8, we have a Zoom meeting. All the staff is there and we all have a 5-minute training, 10-minute training, because we believe that you can't train too much on how to handle children. So something or the other is always there. And yes, as we, these adolescents have always had a lot of challenges, but the present generation of adolescents or pre-adolescents they are a different generation. They are the Gen Z, Gen Alpha, who have everything, the world at their fingertips, and they have a lot of knowledge which they cannot make sense of. So they are constantly trying to experiment with different things. They're constantly thinking of so many different things to do, and constantly oh, why are there so many rules? Why are there so many restrictions? Why can't it be like this? Why can't it be like that? And we have to, constantly keep reminding them that the world is not, this is just a small cocoon you are in. Once you leave secondary school, you go out, there are going to be bigger challenges. So it's very important to be self-disciplined and understand why you do things and have a good sense of your own self-worth. So one thing we do in our school is we tell each and every child to be very mindful, ask themselves the question, who am I? From the time they come in at the age of 9 or 10, we teach them to ask themselves this question, who am I? So what defines you? What do you want to do? And how are you going to translate that into reality? So they constantly keep, introspecting on that. We ask them every year, they do vision boards. And, like we say, it is okay if your vision board is changing every term. What you want to do is changing, but at least you keep thinking about who you are and what you like to do. And we find that over the years, we find that student behavior has improved. They're engaging a lot more in conversing with the people who are around them. They are able to talk and they're able to confide. So I think, that all the training and all the training is really helping, and it is making more empathetic individuals out of everybody. And that is an approach which is really working with the teenagers.
Thank you, Niyata. I think the most powerful thing that you said, which was very, very, I think, powerful, was that you help them focus on themselves as to what they value and where they want to be. I think the more we are, aligned to what we value, and our actions are also aligned to what we value, automatically the whole system changes. The shift happens. Thank you so much for sharing that. There was one more question for Sujata.
Yeah, I think it's regarding the challenges of children
in being
fitting
included.
into the
Would you like to answer that, Sujata?
Absolutely, my pleasure. Because the reason why Vidyaram was started is, it started with that question. Okay, how can our children, who are the children of Indian immigrants in the United States, fit in better in the society with pride? When we say fit in, it's not about pretending to be a white child. It is also being proud of who you are, that feeling pride in one's own identity, right? So it is a very big issue in children growing up abroad, identity crisis. Like, they are confused about who they are, and they are sometimes ashamed of who they are, their skin colors and their heritage and their food and things like that. And there is a very funny term for Indian children growing up in America. It is ABCD. Most of you have heard that. It is the abbreviation for American Born Confused Desi. And it is, I cannot tell how true it is. One reflection I have is when my son was, he's 22 now, when he was a 6-year-old, we were in Philadelphia, and I used to pack Indian lunch to him for school, and his friends used to make fun of it. They used to ask him, why is it so yellow? It looks dirty and it smells, and things like that. And he used to feel very sad about it. And he used to come and tell me, Amma, just pack sandwiches for me because my friends are making fun of my food. And then I approached the teacher, and the teacher was very empathetic. I'm very thankful to her. She held a circle time session with children discussing about various cuisine and different countries and their food. And, that did help other children understand different families have different background, different food and things like that, because it was just an innocent remark. I don't think the other children intentionally wanted to make my child feel sad about his food, but it was an innocent remark because children blurt out whatever comes in their mind. They don't have two face. So they thought, oh, it smells different. And so the word they used is it smells or it stings, or because it was an unpleasant smell for the other children, things like that. So, for children from different background, or children of immigrants growing up in United States, these kind of challenges are there, starting from their skin color, their accent, sometimes if they came to the country later in their life, and sometimes their clothing, their religious belief, many things get ridiculed. And unless they are proud about what they are, what their roots are, and what their heritage is, it is very difficult for that child to fit in. And then it is very easy otherwise for a child to feel low about themselves, and that might affect the child in his entire or her entire life. So that is the reason why Vidyaram was started. Again, I started it for my own son, my third child, who was a 3-year-old when I started this. And I wanted him to be proud of his roots and heritage, and wanted to experience Indian festivals and learn shlokas and cherish or have a love for Indian food. And so everything is included in Vidyaram. And the young children, to answer the specific question, the young children, for example, who are coming to Vidyaram, I don't think they have a crisis at this point, because the younger the child is, they are judgmental. But as they grow older, it is very easy to have them, they will definitely face judgmental comments. But if they are brought up in a way that they feel very proud of their roots and heritage, it's less likely that they feel bad about themselves, and instead they feel proud, and they'll be able to talk, okay, yes, I come from so-and-so country, this is my food, and this is the way we dress up, and this is the temple we go to, whatever it is, the child will be proud about that. And that is a humble attempt through Vidyaram that I'm trying to do.
Thank you, Sujata. Thank you so much for sharing that perspective.
Thank you.
Shweta, I will direct this question to you. So this is the last question we'll take out here. Anshul shares, and I think this is a concern that comes up, that if a child who has intrinsically developed, being empathetic or has the empathetic qualities. So there is this misnomer, or there is this misconception that if you are empathetic, then you can be taken for a ride, or you are soft. So empathy is related to softness. What do you think about it?
I think it is a wonderful question to begin with. And this is where we bring in the concept of helping children understand the difference between empathy and sympathy. Because when a child or when anybody is giving empathy to another person, the other person feels understood, the other person feels respected, and we are creating a safe space, which is extremely brave, which is extremely strong. So there is a lot of strength in empathy. But if we teach a child to show sympathy to another person instead of empathy, that is where the child could be taken for a ride, because the child is constantly showing sympathy, and the child grows up to be somebody who is easily vulnerable, or who is easily taken for a ride, because the child is constantly showing sympathy instead of empathy. So I think we can tackle this problem by helping our children understand the difference between being empathetic towards a person and just showing sympathy and not really caring for another person.
Thank you, Shweta. I completely agree, and I just want to add. So we say that empathy is basically compassion with firmness. So it is not about giving away your needs or putting your needs down. It's basically meeting your needs and the other person's needs too. So with that, I think I will conclude. Thank you so much, Niyata, Shweta, Sujata, for taking out time and being part of this. Thank you, Silre, for giving us this opportunity. Really, really thankful and grateful. And I sincerely hope that this discussion has brought in some thought, some seeds into people to think about what empathy is, how can they foster it in their homes to start with themselves and with others. Thank you so much. Over to you, Srinidhi. Thank you.
Once again, I would like to thank all the panel members for a brilliant session. So now let's have a small engagement, everyone. At this point, I want to see how everybody's feeling. And, so yeah, let's have the Mentimeter slide on the screen. I see some great words coming up. We'll wait for it to populate for about a minute more. Some of the words I'm seeing are empowered, grateful, informative. I see some responses who are going with tired, and yeah, totally understand that. Calm, enthusiastic, educated, loving. Yeah, I think we'll close the session. I mean, the voting session. Yeah, so glad to see that everybody is mostly feeling on a positive note, and we're still looking forward to what's ahead of us. So with that, right, I would like to thank our main sponsors one more time. Efficacy Biostatistics and Statistical Programming Service Provider, and Bluebell School for Integrated Learning, an initiative of the Bluebells Group of Schools, a premier education provider in Gurugram. So up next, I would like to once again go over the code of conduct for the remaining sessions. Can we have the code of conduct on screen? Yes. So three main pillars: be respectful, always choose collaboration over conflict, and disrupt ideas, not meetings. Some etiquettes that we will need to follow. Yeah. Mute yourself. Raise your hand if you want to talk. Come prepared, be on time, keep your video on for the duration of the presentation, and interact with and participate with our panel members. With this, we will be moving on to our next session. Up next is an interesting session on EdTech, a musical perspective by Satish Benmotsa. Satish is the president and co-founder of the Raga School of Music. The Raga School believes in continuing the rich Indian cultural and music tradition by teaching and nurturing the next generation of artists and musicians. The Raga School has been a pioneer in adopting new technology to engage and encourage young students for classwork and practice outside of the school. The school has now over 350 students in the USA. Satish is also the CEO and co-founder of Groundhog, a mine digitization and automation company. He holds an MBA from the prestigious Wharton School of Business and has a master's degree in electrical and computer engineering from the University of Texas at Austin. He did his bachelor's from CBIT, Hyderabad. Satish is very passionate about technology and using it to federate access to information, educational content, and talent. Let us give him a very warm welcome. Over to you, Satish.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Srinidhi. Um, yeah, I mean, I've been listening to these sessions and very, very insightful and inspiring messages all throughout. And the panel session actually blew my mind. It made me start thinking about empathy and sympathy differently. And I think the previous session and this session are maybe 180 degrees, diametrically opposite, but hey, it's a topic. The topic I have around EdTech is very close, is very near and dear to my heart. So what I'd like to share is the latest and greatest innovations that are happening in EdTech, and just looking at it primarily from a music education's perspective. Can I have the next slide, please? So a brief background. Yeah, I mean, we are headquartered here in the US, in San Francisco, San Jose, actually. We were founded in May 2018, and we focused exclusively on Indian classical music, which is Carnatic and Hindustani. We have about 24 teachers with more than 350 students now. The kind of education that we provide to the students also helps them participate in certificate exams and also pass them, in addition to them going out and doing performances on fairly big stages, as well as in the temple and other cultural settings. Next slide, please. Our vision was primarily driven by Ishwar Vemulapalli. Ishwar and I had been friends for more than 20 years. Ishwar strongly believed in teaching his kids classical Indian music, that is Carnatic vocal, veena, tabla, and also did the piano, harmonium. He was super into doing the bhajans and anything that had to do with classical Indian music. He had a passion for that. And when we looked around, what we had found was, there is a big gap in helping the ABCDs, as Sujata Garu mentioned in the previous panel session, is to provide access to the best teachers, so that people can connect back to their roots back in India. And what we had also seen was Indian classical music, from a children's education standpoint, was typically taking a backseat to sports, entertainment, and all of these other things, because with technology, it was hard for parents to have students commit time, effort, and the practice to continue our cultural traditions. So that was one of our foundational principles when we started the school. Next slide, please. So our foundational principles were, to provide access to highly respected artists with a passion for teaching the next generation of musicians through a very engaging curriculum, and also use technology to enable better learning outcomes. Next slide, please. So historically, if you wanted to learn classical Indian music, you had to go seek out very highly respected gurus moved to their villages. They typically stayed in villages, and a lot of them also live in Chennai and Bangalore and these places. And then, you need to prove to the guru that, you're a worthy student. And then the guru also needs to be able to have the time to teach the student. And typically what also happened was, it was a very one-on-one. I mean, the fundamentals, the basics were always taught by the disciples of those gurus. And then you started doing one-on-one sessions with the guru. And then the student typically got feedback during these training sessions to improve their own skill and their ability to project on a stage and also work with other musicians. Next slide, please. So from a logistics standpoint, if you really wanted to learn Carnatic music or Hindustani music, I mean, you had to dedicate your life towards that. However, what we have seen, and there is research published as well, is the best kind of education you can impart to any student, any child, is to have a 360-degree education. So it's not just about STEM, it's not just about math, science, biology. You should also include sports and music, so that it now becomes a well-rounded education for the child. Fortunately, with the sort of technology we have now, right, places like YouTube, sparks consumption and interest in a certain kind of music for the child. In the past, getting access to these teachers was also very hard. So I know, as far as 5 to 8 years ago, there were students here in the US that used to have Skype-based lessons with teachers in India. And in order to practice, because I mean, Guru Shishya system where the students always at the Guru's place, I mean, you had continuous education. However, in these sorts of remote settings, right, classes happen either once a week or 2 times a week. So what people used to do was they used to record their training and share it with the guru, so that the guru can actually review and provide feedback asynchronously, so that you could improve your learning outcomes. Next slide, please. And then over time, I mean, now everybody has access to a smartphone in addition to a computer. At least at our school, we used to let students and parents record their sessions with the teachers, so that once they went back home, they could refer back to those lessons instead of just taking notes. Because music, you have to hear in order to be able to reproduce. You can't read music and be able to reproduce the sound when you want to go back and practice at home. So we were one of the first schools that said, please record all of your sessions so that you can practice back at home. And then you could always do a second recording and then compare notes and also share with the teachers. And with the advancement of these phones, can we go back to the previous? Yeah. With the advancement of all of these smartphones, you now have a lot of apps that help you learn Carnatic music, Hindustani music better at home. I mean, there are apps for setting up, your metronomes. You can also tune your instruments. You can tune your tabla. You can tune your piano. You can tune a guitar. You name it, right? The technology is pervasive enough now that people have figured out how to set up your instruments, right? One of the biggest difficulties back in the early days was, how do I know whether I'm singing sarigama at the right pitches and at the right frequencies and things like that? Now you actually have apps where you sing into the app and it'll tell you to go higher or lower on the note scale. So apps and technology has helped accelerate the learning process, and it's also made it more engaging for the students as well, especially the kids, because the kids respond better to instantaneous feedback, and they get this through games. I mean, I haven't come across a kid recently that does not enjoy playing video games, and when playing video games, um, they get immediate feedback, right? I mean, that is through badges. uh, you know, there's always some sort of gamification so that uh, the students get positive responses when they reach various levels, and they're able to do that through these apps as well, where you start earning badges that increases your what do you call, your appetite for learning more, and then learning faster too. What has also happened recently is, in the past, if you wanted to record your performance, I mean, you had to actually assemble people together to your room, to a recording studio or something, and then create a performance. Now, what technology has enabled, and I have a couple of friends that have actually tried the Naad Sadhana app, where back in the day, Yamaha and other piano companies used to have these pre where you don't need an entire band to create your own music. That sort of functionality or capability is now available even for classical Indian music. I would, if you're into Indian music, I would strongly recommend that you try these sorts of apps out, because that way you don't need to wait for a performance. You don't need to wait to prepare for a performance. And you can also, just watch YouTube videos, then get one of these Talanom apps, to start singing by yourself. Now, with all of these technologies, right, do you still need a teacher, right? What we find is self-paced learning, and we found this during this pandemic as well, is Zoom-based learning or video-based learning has its limitations. People actually want physical interactions with the people that they are learning from. And number two is you also have to be able to hold the student accountable. That's where the teacher's role is super important, especially in terms of nurturing talent, nudging them to the next higher level. Students by themselves through these apps will not progress as fast as through being taught by a teacher. All of these apps and stuff are ancillary tools that you can use to accelerate your development, but we still believe that the teacher has to be front and center to help students progress along their educational journey. Next slide, please. So the limitations with EdTech, right? Like I said, especially for beginners, they're still better off with in-person lessons, because then you have that contact. I mean, you're still unsure about how to go about learning those sorts of things. And once they reach a certain level, like once they reach an intermediate level, then they can start using technology to enhance their learning. Then these Zoom lessons make a lot more sense, because by then you would have had all of your fundamentals right. Now, one of the other limitations still is I mean, Zoom has come a long way, WebEx has come a long way, Microsoft Teams has come a long way, but from a technology standpoint, it's still hard to do live group performance just because of the of the minute delays in terms of various people singing and then coming into harmony and then being able to stitch all of these audio streams and video streams together. Next slide, please. So, I mean, we've come a long way over the past 15 years in terms of how technology is starting to affect the way we learn and also the way we learn music. As most of you educators know, every child is unique. That said, you can group these children into into smaller subsets where, you know, into subsets where people have a way, have a preference for learning style. So within my class itself, I'm a very visual learner. There were others that were very auditory learners, and yet others that had to see something or they had to read something to learn, right? So some of the innovations that you can look forward to is see whether AI can teach music by generating personalized lesson plans. For example, everybody has different preferences for music styles, and even within Carnatic, you have you prefer certain performers more than other performers, right? So you should be able to identify a music style for a particular person, and then you know, also be able to identify learning preferences through a sequence of questions or by just looking at the sorts of music that you enjoy. I mean, basically have a Spotify kind of algorithm or a Pandora type of algorithm to figure out what your learning preferences are, and also identify, you know, which sort of gurus you want to learn from, and then tailor your your learning plan accordingly, where the AI, you know, in addition to your in-person classes, that AI now has a very tailored learning plan for you based on your learning preferences, right? The teacher still holds you accountable, the parents also hold you accountable, and then the AI can also kind of, you know, understand what the parameters of that accountability are, and then help you achieve better learning outcomes. So big picture, I see EdTech. Oh, and by the way, I mean, there is multiple kinds of EdTech, right? The first is, you know, learning math, English, and stuff through these virtual lessons, and then there is music. I think there is still a big gap between, you know, the sorts of things that you learn at bijus.com and the Khan Academy and learning music in terms of capabilities. So we have a long way to go. The future is super bright. And what excites me most about all of these innovations, especially when it comes to EdTech, is I think we can still continue our passion for teaching the next generation of musicians to continue our, you know, traditional music forms, which I think are under attack by, I mean, culturally, by Western music, Bollywood music, you know, Tollywood music, and, you know, gaming and all of that stuff. So, you know, this is my perspective on EdTech and how it applies to music. I mean, I'd like to open it up for questions from you folks.
Please address your questions in the chat box, or you can request to be unmuted.
So what are some organizations working in this area? So if we go back to my slide deck on the last slide, and I should have seen it. So there are quite a few companies that are actually working on this sort of technology, and they are being funded by venture capital funding. The one that I found that is most advanced in these sorts of things are Kina.ai. But again, I don't know how far they are away from a commercially viable product, but we are starting to get there. And then things like Kina are, right now I think they're still focused on the Western music because that's a much larger market, right? I mean, businesses go after profitability more than social causes, right? So once they've figured out how to do Western music, I think, the classical Indian music will just be smaller add-ons. I mean, not just classical Indian music. I mean, you can do Persian music, you can do Russian music, doesn't matter. The next question was, can people with disabilities, physical or intellectual, learn music? What are some of the gaps there and what can we do to bridge that gap? Can people with disabilities learn music? So in addition to the Raga school, we also used to run a Western music school where we had students that were on the autistic spectrum learn piano and drums. It actually helped them calm down. And they were to me, they made amazing music. So I think people with disabilities can learn music, and actually it helps them deal with their disabilities as well. Again, I think you would have to look at where they are on that spectrum, and you also need to have teachers that have the compassion, that have the empathy to be able to understand what it takes to teach these sorts of students. At the Raga school, we have not had students come through that have any sort of disability. But as part of the Western school, like I said, I mean, the Western school had about 400 students, and of that, I mean, we had close to 20 students that actually had disabilities. What are the gaps there? I mean, a lot really depends on. One of the biggest gap is a lot of teachers are not trained to handle. It takes a certain kind of teacher to be able to understand and empathize with the situation, and then adjust your training plan accordingly, right? So I think that's a pretty big gap. What can help bridge the gap? I don't know. I mean, it's a human thing, right? I mean, you can't force a teacher to have the empathy to teach a person with disability. It's their personal choice, right? So it's a very hard question. I don't have a ready answer. I don't want to provide an answer for the sake of providing an answer. Yeah.
Thank you, Satish. If there
Sure,
are
sure.
no further questions, then we would like to close the session. This was a great session. For me personally, it is the intersection of two of my passions, music and tech. I'm an engineer, and technology is always fascinating for me, and the way it intersects with education and especially music is a very fascinating area. So thank you once again, Satish. So this has been a wonderful session overall, and we are nearing the end of it. So before we close, I would request all the participants and the speakers to take part in an engagement activity called Reflections. So can we have the Mentimeter screen on? Yeah. So I would request everybody to scan the QR code, go to the link, and just look back on this session that we had, and fill out these parameters. You can take a couple of minutes to do this. Can we have the results screen on display? Thank you, everyone. The voting has closed, and it's really great to see that all of these questions have rated above a 4. And I'm really glad, and on behalf of Silray, we are really glad that all of you could join us today and engage and participate in these sessions and carry away a lot of learnings. So I guess with this, we will log off now. And I had a great time emceeing for you today. So I hope everybody else also had a great time. And while you are here, a couple of last seconds, this will be our agenda for tomorrow if you want to take a quick look. We hope to see everybody tomorrow, and have a good day, good night, good afternoon from wherever you're logging in from. Thank you, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.